A lone woman's quiet life shatters when 7 Comanche riders seek shelter. Secrets, blood ties, and old wounds rise as a deadly posse closes in. With fire, grit, and buried pain, she must fight for redemption. A slow-burn western with deep emotion, explosive conflict, and a powerful, satisfying climax. The valley didn't have a name anymore. The old maps had called it Bitter Creek, but no one used that now. A dry creek bed snaked through it like a scar, and even the grass seemed to grow with suspicion, thin and low, as if it had learned not to trust the wind. She lived at the edge of it, in a cabin she had rebuilt 3 times, once from rot, once from fire, and once because she needed something to do besides bury people. She didn't have a name, either, not one she gave out. The few traders who knew her called her the woman in the valley, and that was enough. She kept to herself, grew vegetables, kept goats, repaired her fences with more care than most men gave their wives. On Sundays, she'd walk up the ridge and sit with a coffee tin full of dried sage and old ashes. No one knew why, and she never said. The land suited her, quiet, brutal, and watching. It asked nothing, gave less, and remembered everything. The floorboards in her cabin creaked, like they were whispering. The walls leaned just slightly, like they'd seen too much. There was a rifle above the door she hadn't fired in years, and a tin box beneath her bed with something heavier than gold inside it. She didn't look at it often. It was the sound that woke her. Hooves. Not many sounds made it into her sleep, but horses always did. Not a single horse. Many. She sat up slowly, feeling the old ache in her knees, and went to the window. Dust plumed on the horizon, then shapes, tall, broad silhouettes, on horseback, riding in deliberate formation. Not cowboys. Not lawmen. Comanche. 7 of them. They didn't charge. They didn't call out. They rode straight and slow, like they had all the time in the world and none to waste. She didn't reach for the rifle, just watched. When they were 50 yards out, they stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the wind flapping through the cholla cactus and the distant groan of an old windmill. One rider raised a hand, palm open, peace sign. He was older than the rest, wide-shouldered, still as stone. The others stayed silent behind him, dust and sweat streaking their faces. She opened the door, didn't smile, didn't ask questions. "You're wet," she said. "And I got stew." That was all it took. Inside, the fire was low, the air smelled of sage and boiled onions, and the light flickered across cracked walls. She ladled stew into wooden bowls without ceremony and set them on a long table. The men sat without speaking, except one, young, barely more than a boy, who winced as he moved. Blood soaked the side of his shirt. A gunshot wound, clean through, judging by the way he held himself. She noted it, said nothing. The older one, the one with the quiet eyes and war-worn posture, watched her. Not the way a man watches a woman, but the way someone studies a book written in a language they half remember. His hair was streaked with gray, his face unreadable. She couldn't place it, but something about him tugged at the edge of memory, like a name half swallowed by time. "Storm's coming," she said, more to the room than anyone. "You'll stay the night." The quiet man gave a small nod. "We'll leave by morning." She poured herself a bowl and sat on the far side of the room, beside the fireplace, cross-legged on the floor. The stew was thin, but warm. The men ate like men used to going hungry, without haste, but without wasting a drop. Later, when the bowls were scraped clean and the wind had picked up outside, she moved to the wounded one. He flinched when she knelt, but she waved him down like she would a skittish dog. "Bullet come out." He nodded. "Still inside." He hesitated, then nodded again. She sighed. "You're lucky it ain't festered yet." "Lucky," he repeated softly, as if testing the word. His voice carried a trace of the Comanche tongue, a roughness smoothed by too many nights in the wild. She pulled a small knife from a leather roll, sterilized it in the fire, and didn't wait for permission. He didn't scream. She respected that. When it was done, she stitched the hole and packed it with dried moss and whiskey. The older man hovered nearby, but didn't interfere. His eyes followed every movement of her hands. She didn't look at him. "Why here?" she asked finally, her voice low. The boy started to answer, but the older one cut in. Because we needed a place that still meant something. She froze for a moment, the suture needle half-threaded. This place don't mean anything, she said flatly. It does to some. She didn't answer, just tied the knot and stood. The men slept on the floor, shoulders close, like wolves. She kept the rifle nearby, but never touched it. Instead, she sat awake beside the fire, listening to the wind batter the shutters and the storm crackle across the ridges. Thunder rolled like hooves, long and low. She dreamed of a man once, dark hair, voice like gravel and honey. He used to play a flute carved from juniper, always one note too sad. She dreamed of a child, barefoot in the red dust, chasing after rabbits with a wooden spear. She dreamed of soldiers, fire, smoke. Woke up with her jaw clenched and tears she hadn't meant to shed. Before dawn, she went outside. The storm had passed. The valley smelled of wet earth and char. The Comanche horses were still tied, breathing in slow clouds, heads low. The quiet man stood by the fence, looking toward the rising sun. He didn't turn as she approached. "You buried something last night," she said. "I did. In my orchard." He nodded. "What was it?" He looked at her then. Really looked. Proof. She almost asked more. Almost. Instead, she said, "Storm didn't take the roof. That's something." "It is." They stood in silence. Finally, he said, "Do you remember Red Clay Creek?" Her breath caught like a dry stick in the throat. She hadn't heard that name in 15 years. The world narrowed around it. "I remember," she said. He didn't press. He didn't need to. They walked back to the house together, quiet as ghosts. The sun rose behind them, lighting the valley gold and blood red. And from the hill, far away but certain, came the thin trail of dust, a signal. Someone else was coming. Not Comanche. She didn't say a word, just went inside, set water to boil, and pulled the rifle off the wall. The next morning came slow and colorless, a pale gray sheet draped over the sky. Fog clung low to the ground, swallowing fence posts and softening the lines of the land. She stood on the porch, mug in hand, steam curling like breath from between her fingers. The 7 horses stood tethered, flanks twitching at gnats, heads bowed like penitents. Inside, the Comanche were stirring. She hadn't asked names. Names gave things shape, weight, made them harder to bury. But the quiet man, she had started to think of him as that, the quiet man, moved differently than the others. When he walked, the boards beneath his boots didn't creak. He watched everything with a kind of patience that made her skin itch. He saw too much and said too little. She caught him at the well later, pulling water for the wounded one. The young man's fever hadn't broken. Sweat had soaked through the wool blanket. She pressed the back of her hand to his neck. "Too hot. He needs rest and root tincture," she muttered. "We'll leave by midday," the quiet man said behind her. "You leave now, he dies before dusk." He didn't argue, just held her gaze like a question he wouldn't ask. They worked side by side for a while, not speaking. She grated willow bark, boiled it down, strained it through cloth. He fed the fire and mended the boy's saddle strap, worn to threads. His hands were precise, deliberate. She noticed how he handled leather, like it meant something. In the afternoon, she found 2 of the younger riders moving things inside her barn, stacking tools against the wall, checking aloft. One of them had a skinning knife tucked into his boot. He tried to look casual, but his eyes were tracking her movements. "This isn't a fort," she said. "You planning to make it one?" "No offense meant," the taller one said. "Just being cautious." "Cautious is closing a gate," she replied. "You start shifting my barn like it's a battlefield. I start wondering what you brought with you." The taller one looked to the other. Neither answered. She didn't press, just walked away. By nightfall, the sky had cleared, but attention hung in the cabin like smoke. The wounded boy mumbled in his sleep, half-formed words in Comanche and English. Once he called her auntie. Her hands paused on the stew pot, spoon dripping midair. Later, when the others had taken to their bedrolls, she stood at the doorway, silhouetted in the firelight. The quiet man leaned against the porch rail, smoking something wrapped in corn husk. "You never said what brought you here," she said. "We were told this valley would hold." "By who?" "Someone who remembered you." She frowned. "There's not many left who do." "Enough." She studied him for a moment. His eyes weren't cruel, but there's a kind of sadness in them. Or maybe weariness. She had seen that look once before, in a mirror, the day after she buried her son. "You fought at Red Clay Creek," he said softly. The words landed like a bullet, without a sound. "I did," she answered. "I fought and I lost." He nodded, but didn't look away. "I remember the smoke," she said after a beat. "The way it turned the sky orange. We tried to hold the line. Thought if we just stood still long enough, we could stop the bleeding. Didn't work." "No, it didn't." They stood in the silence that followed, the land holding its breath. "I knew someone," he said, "a long time ago. She had your eyes." "Most women do." He shook his head. "No, not like this. Eyes like they'd seen the inside of fire and come back cold." She didn't reply. The next morning, one of the scouts returned. He was the leanest of the group, with sharp cheekbones and a jagged scar over one eyebrow. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. "They're close," he said in Comanche. "How many?" asked the quiet man. 10. Maybe more. Posse out of Junction Ridge. They've got long rifles and horses built for speed." The woman's jaw tightened. She turned back toward the cabin without a word. Inside, she took out a box from beneath the bed. It was iron heavy. She pried it open with the butt of a boot heel. Inside, old maps, rotted parchment, a rusted medal, a child's wooden toy, hand-carved, missing a leg, and a folded piece of cloth, once white, now stained dark with blood. She didn't cry, just stared. The quiet man appeared in the doorway. "You were one of the few who stayed," he said. "I was stupid," she said. "You were loyal." "Same thing sometimes." He stepped closer. "You buried something important out here, didn't you?" She looked up, slowly. "Who told you about this place?" she asked. "My uncle. Said if ever things got real bad, find the woman who burned the depot and walked out alive. That's not a story to repeat. It's the only one we got." She exhaled through her nose. "Thought for a long time. You're being hunted." "Yes. You bring death here, I'll bury it same as I've done before. We don't plan to die. They never do." He looked at her then with something sharper than gratitude. Not pleading, not hope, just recognition. "You'll need a better place to hide," she said finally. That night, while the wounded boy burned with fever and the wind howled across the ridge, she walked the orchard alone. Moonlight fell in broken silver patches across the dirt. She found it, the fresh mound, earth turned recently. She knelt, fingers brushing the soil. Beneath it, she found a canvas bundle. Inside, land deeds, brittle and stained. Names written in English and Comanche. A treaty signed and then crossed out in red ink. And the toy again, identical to the one in her own box. It wasn't hers, but it might have belonged to her son, or her sisters, or someone she had once tried to save. She walked back to the house slowly, dawn not far off. When she entered, the quiet man was awake, watching the fire. "You knew," she said. He nodded. "You think hiding here changes anything?" "No," he said. "But it's the only place we've been where the wind didn't hate us." She sat down across from him, stared into the fire a while. "There's a man coming with them," he said after a beat. "White coat, burned face, carries a braid on his belt." She didn't react, not right away. "I've seen that braid," she said. "Yours." She didn't answer. The fire crackled between them. Somewhere outside, an owl hooted. The valley held its silence like a secret. The quiet man leaned back. "We leave at first light," he said. She looked at him long and hard, then stood, went to the hearth, and pulled aside a loose board. Underneath, oilcloth, and under that rifles. Ammunition. A tomahawk, blade still sharp. She looked back at him. "You're not leaving," she said. He blinked. "You came here for shelter," she continued. "You'll get it. But I don't offer safety to ghosts. I offer a fight." And for the first time since they'd arrived, he smiled, just a little. It didn't reach his eyes. The fire between them burned brighter. The wind outside shifted, and somewhere beyond the hills, 10 riders began their final descent. She rose before the sun and walked into the orchard barefoot. The ground was cold and soft beneath her soles, still damp from last week's storm. The peach trees stood like skeletal sentries, thin and leafless, branches black against the paling sky. She found the mound easily. It hadn't been packed right, just a loose attempt at hiding rather than burying. She knelt without ceremony and began to dig, fingers cutting through dirt like a woman planting seeds. She wasn't sure what she expected to find, maybe ammunition, maybe something sacred, but when her hand brushed canvas, her breath caught. She pulled it free and unfolded the bundle with practice calm. Inside, brittle papers wrapped in oilcloth, curling at the edges. She read slowly. Land deeds, some signed by men long dead. A treaty that had never seen law. A name she hadn't heard in 20 years. And beneath the papers, a small wooden figure. A child's carving of a buffalo. Simple, worn smooth by time and small hands. She stared at it like it might speak. Once, she had carved something just like it for a boy with long lashes and a crooked smile. He used to run through this very orchard, bare feet kicking up dust, wild and shrieking with laughter. Until the soldiers came. Until she made her last mistake. She stood slowly, fists clenched around the figure. Her heart didn't beat fast. It beat hard, like a warning drum before a raid. When she came back into the house, the men were already up. The quiet man was stringing a bow at the table. One of the others cleaned his rifle in the corner, wiping it down like it was holy. No one spoke until she laid the carving on the table in front of them. You knew this was his land, she said. The quiet man didn't deny it. It was his father's, passed down. She looked at him with eyes that had held graves. Was it my boy's? There was a long pause. Then softly, maybe. She stepped back. Why bury it? We thought we were going to die here. Wanted to put the truth somewhere it might be found. She turned, jaw tight. You still might. The scout came back by mid-morning. His horse lathered, eyes wide. They're coming, he said. Be here before sundown. 10 riders, maybe more. One with a white coat carrying fire. She closed her eyes and let the breath hiss through her teeth. That name, White Coat, wasn't new. It lived in nightmares. He'd led the men who burned red clay. He'd worn her husband's death like a badge. She didn't ask questions after that. Just started giving orders. The barn was cleared first. They pulled out tools, feed sacks, anything that would catch fire. She directed them to drag the iron stove from the house and bolt it over the back door, sealed tight. The orchard became a trap field. They buried nails, glass, broken rake heads beneath false leaves. They strung wire between trees, chest high. The wounded boy still lay inside, sweat slick and burning. She checked his fever, slightly down. He might live, if she bought him enough time. That night, they all sat around the fire, and she passed out rifles from the cache beneath the floorboards. Weapons older than some of the men. Cleaned and oiled, but scarred by history. One had notches down the stock, 7 of them. She didn't say what they meant. The quiet man sat beside her, rubbing stone over a blade. His movements were slow, deliberate. Her hands trembled slightly as she loaded shells into a cylinder. I should have left years ago, she murmured. Why didn't you? She didn't answer right away. This place, she said finally, it was never good. But it was mine. And, after everything, I didn't know what else I was allowed to want. He turned to her. You still don't think you're allowed? She didn't meet his eyes. Survivors don't get redemption. They just outlive everyone who needed it. He looked back toward the orchard, toward the shadows between trees. We've been running so long, he said. You forget what it feels like to stop. You forget what it means to defend something instead of flee. A beat passed. And you, she asked. Why are you still with them? You're not young. I promised his mother, he said, nodding toward the boy. Promised I'd keep him safe. He's the last blood we got. She nodded once sharply. That mattered. Blood always did. They didn't sleep that night. Just listened. The wind picked up around 2 in the morning, dragging dust and the scent of sage through the cracks in the wall. Coyotes howled, far off, like they knew something was coming. At dawn, she climbed the ridge with her rifle and the quiet man beside her. They lay on their bellies in the brush, cold seeping into their bones. The posse came into view just after sunrise, 11 men, not 10. All white, all armed. Leading them was a tall man in a tattered white duster, the fabric stained like old bones. He wore a long rifle across his back and a hat too clean for trail work. His horse was black proud, and on his belt, clear as morning, hung a braid of black hair tied with red string. She felt bile rise in her throat. "That's hers," she said. The quiet man's voice was grave. "It's why we came here." They watched the posse dismount, scan the valley, move forward in a crescent shape. They were careful, too careful. Trained. Not drunk ranch hands or desperate thieves. These men had hunted before. She turned back down the ridge. "They'll be on us in 2 hours." He nodded. "What do you want us to do?" Her voice came quiet, sharp. "Everything." They returned to the cabin and began final prep. Buckets of oil placed by the doors. Triggers rigged on the wire. Arrows dipped in tar and flame. The quiet man stopped her before she went inside. He handed her something, small, carved from bone. It was a bird. Simple, elegant. The wings spread, unfinished. "You used to wear this," he said. She took it slowly. Her fingers brushed his. "I lost it," she whispered. "No," he said. "You just forgot where to look." She clenched the carving tight. Her throat was raw. "Don't die today," she said. "Not planning to." She smiled barely. "Good. We've got more names to carve." He looked puzzled. "In the sky," she said. "When this is done." Inside, the boy stirred again. Fever low now. Breathing easier. She sat by him, pressed her palm to his cheek. "You remember your name?" she asked. He blinked, dazed. "No, ma'am." She smoothed his hair. "That's all right. You'll earn a new one." Outside, the wind began to rise. And with it came the sound of hoofbeats. The first shot came just after sunup, cracking the still air like a bone under pressure. She was already crouched by the window, her cheek pressed to the stock of the rifle, breath measured, steady. The bullet tore into the corner post of the cabin, splintering old pine, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she exhaled slowly and answered. Her shot dropped the man behind the barrel cactus. He didn't even cry out, just folded inward like something deflating. Dust rose around his body in a slow spiral. One down. The orchard lit up a heartbeat later. A second man tripped the wire between the trees, and the nails hidden under the dirt shredded his horse's legs. The animal screamed through him, and he landed wrong, neck twisted, eyes already still. Another turned his rifle toward the cabin and caught an arrow in the throat. It burned the whole way down. Inside, the quiet man reloaded beside her. He moved methodically, no wasted effort, no nerves. Outside, the air stank of sweat and oil and hot metal. The porch had turned into a front line. One of the younger Comanche fired from the loft window, pulling back just in time to avoid a shot that blew the sill to splinters. "They're flanking right," she called, already moving. She kicked open the cellar door, where 2 others waited with rifles and buckets of pitch. The moment she opened it, they surged upward and began tossing fire. The dry brush around the back perimeter caught instantly, choking the edge of the field in smoke. They weren't trying to win yet, just confuse, just slow. The white coat rode in behind the others, not hurrying. He dismounted with grace, unslung the long rifle from his back, and studied the field like a surveyor choosing where to dig. The braid swayed against his hip, catching the wind. It wasn't hers, she knew that now. But it had belonged to someone like her, someone who tried to make a life where no one was allowed to. She pressed her eye to the scope, took a breath. But the quiet man's hand came down gently on her rifle. "Not yet," he said. "They'll breach." He nodded. "But not him. He wants the fire to do his work. He wants to watch it burn." He was right. The white coat wasn't firing, just walking now, slow and sure, weaving between the dead. A smile ghosted his mouth. She knew men like that. They fed off myth, believed they were part of the land's hunger. Her hand ached to pull the trigger, but she let go. The flanking riders breached first. One came through the barn, firing wildly. Another rushed through the side fence and hit a buried trap, tore his thigh wide open on a rusted saw blade. Screaming, he fell writhing. She didn't watch him die, just moved. They pulled back to the inner line, just the orchard and the house now. 4 of the 7 Comanche were still standing. The wounded boy, fever-broken, lay in the root cellar with a knife in his hand, breath steady but shallow. The quiet man took a round to the shoulder. It spun him sideways, dropped him to one knee. She dragged him back behind the rain barrel, tore his shirt, and stuffed the wound with cloth. "Still breathing?" she asked. "For now," he grunted. "Then keep doing it." He grinned faintly through the pain. "You always this sweet under pressure?" "Only when company's over." A shot rang out from the porch. One of the riders fell back, screaming, clutching his eye. But then the cabin wall exploded inward. 2 shots from the whitecoats, rifle blowing a hole through the logs. Dust and light streamed in. The house shook. Then came silence. Too quiet. She turned toward the back door just as it creaked open. He stood there, closed now, coat flapping gently in the breeze. Rifle still warm in his hand, the braids swaying like a pendulum. His eyes were pale and empty, like snow before it melts. "I heard you were dead," he said. She didn't reply. "I heard you walked into the fire and came out the other side. Thought maybe you were a ghost." Still, she said nothing, just stepped between him and the cellar door. "You were the one who lit the red clay stockade," he went on, stepping inside. "You cost me 3 good men." "You killed 73, she said coldly. "Depends on who's counting." They stared at each other for a long beat. The rifle in her hands felt suddenly heavy. Not like before. Not like justice. Like judgment. He raised his own slowly, no rush. Like a man settling an old debt. Then she stepped forward and fired. But he was faster. His bullet hit first, ripped into her side, spun her half around. Her shot went wide, slamming into the wall. She dropped to one knee, gasping, the taste of iron in her throat. He came forward calmly, a knife in hand now. "Should have stayed dead," he whispered. But the moment he stepped past her, a shape rose from the cellar, thin and staggering, blood on his face and fire in his eyes. The boy. He drove the knife deep into the whitecoat's ribs. Once. Twice. Again. The man choked, stumbled back, clawing at the wound. She raised her rifle, hands shaking, and fired again. This time, she didn't miss. The white coat hit the floor hard, eyes wide, mouth still trying to form a word. The blade swung once, then stilled. Silence, long and deep. Then footsteps. The quiet man limped in, holding his shoulder, eyes scanning the wreckage. She met his gaze, then dropped her rifle, with a thud. The boy collapsed beside her, unconscious, but alive. They wrapped her side tight, kept pressure on it. She stayed upright long enough to give orders, to check the dead, to light the last fire and toss the white coat's body on it. She watched it burn, didn't say a word. By dusk it was over. Smoke curled into the cooling sky, the last of the posse smoldering in the dirt or scattered to the hills. The orchard was half ruined, the barn cracked and listing, but the house still stood. And so did she. Days passed. The wounded boy healed fast, too fast, like someone afraid the world might not wait. He began helping around the place, mending fence, tending goats. His name still hadn't returned. She started calling him Hawk, after the way he watched everything, silent and sharp. The quiet man stayed, though he said he wouldn't. He didn't say why. She didn't ask. Sometimes they sat on the porch in silence, sipping coffee as the wind moved through the grasses like a voice. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked once. "Every day." And she looked out over the valley. The orchard would bloom again next year. If she planted it right. If the soil forgave her. "Not yet," she said. "Too many ghosts still walking." He nodded. "You think they'll come back?" "The dead." "No. The others." She turned the carved bird over in her hand, thumb brushing the wingtip. "If they're smart," she said, "they'll stay gone. And if they're not," she smiled, "then we'll carve more names into the sky." That night, the wind rose again, but this time it carried no blood, only sage and ash and the faintest trace of spring.